The
I'm well.
the
Good
narrative
morning.
seems to be that you guys are going to sit on rates for an extended period of time. Um, does that mean, in your view, that's consistent with this year? Are you not going to move on rates this year based on, obviously, the current knowledge that you have?
Well, right now, we're looking at, on the economy, we're looking at 2011 as a recovery year, and that 2022, that's when we will be back to where we were before the crisis. So we think the current policy setting is appropriate for this kind of outlook. So we intend to maybe keep an accommodative monetary policy with existing policy rates at historic lows, 2%, to provide support to the economy.
Okay, and in terms of, I guess, helping businesses and markets also plan ahead, is it still too early to talk about raising interest rates?
I think it's too early raising interest rates. We're focused on, of course, assessing the developments abroad and at home, and right now we don't see any need for raising interest rates at this point.
Understood. Okay, Governor, just to build on your earlier point there, that you do expect the output of the economy to return to pre-pandemic levels by 2022. Is that also your assumption for consumption in the economy, that it's still a next year story in terms of a full recovery?
No, I think there will be an upsurge in consumption this year because of of course, we had a significant fall in consumption last year because of the pandemic and the severe lockdown. But we expect consumption to maybe grow 5% this year.
And what does that then mean for your expectations on unemployed and underemployed? Because when I look at the data, last I checked, as of October, we're still talking roughly maybe even 9 million people. How does that improve in your view this year?
Yeah, I think unemployment will continue to improve. As you said, it was severely cut during the second quarter of last year, improved in the third quarter, and if you look at quarter on quarter, it continues to improve. And so we're optimistic that as we open up the economy, and the plan is to open up the whole economy to go to the lowest quarantine level nationwide, so that should there be a surge in some areas, there will be just a village level or town level lockdown, not region-wide, not province-wide, not nationwide lockdown. So we expect unemployment to pick up hand in hand with the opening up of the economy and increased activity in the economy.
Okay, and just to build on that, I'm wondering whether your economists have already crunched the numbers. Do you think the job creation this year then will fully reverse last year's job destruction?
That's our target. Before the pandemic, the unemployment rate was in the neighborhood of 5%. And so we feel that we want the unemployment to be at that level, more or less, 5%. And in fact, there's a major change in the way we gather statistics. We used to gather a quarterly data on unemployment. I asked the planning agency to make it a monthly gathering of data so that we have more recent information. So the target really is for unemployment to be around 5%. And we expect some improvement on unemployment.
Understood.
The latest, as you said, was October was about slightly less than 9%. So we expect the unemployment numbers to improve.
Governor, I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah, I mean, as of October, I mean, that's about 4 months away. And hopefully, of course, you do gain some traction there in coming up with more frequent data sets for everyone to have a better sense of the economy. Now, alongside the expectations on consumption and the recovery, I know you work very closely, of course, with the rollout of the vaccine, and hopefully that gets started sooner rather than later. What is the central bank's assumption on when the country might be able to attain herd immunity. And by some measures, that's about 75% of the population getting inoculated with a vaccine.
And hopefully we'll get the vaccine sometime next week. But the target is to vaccinate around 70 million before the end of the year. So that's the target. And we're optimistic that we're going to get the 70. So the target is 70 million adult population out of a population of 110. And so we are optimistic we'll complete that before the end of the year.
Okay, and I guess if you do use that threshold of 75%, it looks like hopefully you're correct, that we do get to herd immunity for the country by the end of this year. I'd like to pivot and talk about inflation here. The last number that came out, I have to say, was quite ugly, 4.2%. And I know you've raised your forecast to 4% for inflation for the full year. What's going on with inflation there?
Well, that's the recent uptick in inflation is mainly due to supply side factors, including, of course, the rise in international oil prices and increase in key food commodities such as meat and vegetables. That was, of course, brought about by the outbreak of the African swine fever and the weather-related disturbances. We see this as transitory, and so we expect inflation to be elevated maybe during the first half of this year, but it will taper off in the second half, and we're optimistic that it will still be within our target range of 3% plus or minus 1%, so 2 to 4%. So in fact, our recent analysis is that inflation will be around 4% average for this year, but it will, of course, be lower than the 3% in year 2022 as things normalize.
Okay, Governor Ben, another development in the country was the president signing into law, I understand, the creation of a bad bank, essentially then to offload some of the bad assets in the banking sector and hopefully open up their ability to lend. I know you're supportive of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you expect from that bad bank, and what is the bad loan situation across the banking sector?
Well, good you asked that question. As you know, during the Asian financial crisis, a similar measure was put in place, but it was much delayed. It was put up. It was approved 3 years after the Asian financial crisis. Now we asked for this to be approved, and it was contemporaneous. It was approved right while we are still in crisis. I see this as a backup measure. Because, as you know, because of the Asian financial crisis, we were able to put a lot of reforms that made our banking system fairly stable and well capitalized. So the feature of this is that, as I said, this is a fallback position, just in case. Right now, the net NPL ratio of the Philippine banking system is around 3.61%. That's fairly manageable compared to where it was during the Asian financial crisis, which was fairly close to 20%. So given this bill, we call it FIST bill, but it will allow banks to create asset management companies, and the bill will help keep the banking system stable despite the effects of the pandemic.
Governor, just picking up on that word you mentioned you mentioned stable, and I'd hopefully like to end this interview on that. The big market story this week has been this sort of reflation trend, people changing their expectations on inflation and growth moving forward. I know it's not directly under the purview of the central bank what happens with markets, but when you look at valuations across the world in many financial assets, they are quite elevated. How does the Bangko Sentral approach the issue of asset bubbles, and do you think we're actually near one?
No, I think we closely monitor not only the behavior of banks, but also the conglomerates associated with the banks. And so we're at the moment we're comfortable with the situation, but as I said, we continue to monitor, and we do not see any problems at the moment.